Address council, now's the time to do it. Anybody? I think everybody's, oh yeah, you want to?
Can I do it?
Come on up and tell us who you are. We need you on record.
I just take a minute. My name is Jim Boyd, Cook County Chamber. I sent you an email that Judy Erickson, who represents us in St. Paul, reported today that the harbor access is in the Senate bonding bill for $2.3 million.
Super.
It's not in the House, but she thinks everything's strange this year. For example, there's no funding for Gitchigami in either one, but she says there's some plan for finding that funding somewhere else that we'll hear about next week. So it's all strange. But she thought that being in the Senate bill meant that we were well positioned for the final week of arm wrestling over what will eventually come out. So I thought you might know that.
Do we know when that final week of arm wrestling is going to be?
Yeah, the constitutional deadline for the end of the session's
21st.
what?
21st.
21st. There you go. So we'll know by then.
Okay.
Good. So I just thought you'd like to know that.
Great.
It's kind of fun.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Good update. Anybody else? Open forum? Anybody? Bueller? All right, closing the open forum, moving on to the consent agenda. Consent agenda has typical 3 things on it, as usual. Unless somebody would like to pull an item for discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
All motion to approve the consent agenda?
There's a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. All right, so now we've got the Planning Commission report. So we have a couple of variances on here, and one of them, the Bowen? Just want to make sure I'm saying that right. Yeah. Has a chunk of property on 4th Avenue West that would like to subdivide, so to speak. I guess that's probably not the term you're using, but
No.
break it up into smaller lots and needs a variance for one of the lots because it'd be too small. Am I correct in understanding that properly?
Yeah, it's not a formal subdivision, but this portion of the property would require a variance to create the lot that they're proposing.
One of the lots.
One of the lots.
Because there's
The remaining lots would all comply, there would be 4 other lots that
Four
would
other
comply
lots.
with the standards. This one would not comply with the width requirement.
but the depth requirement is appropriate.
Well, we can go through all of that when we talk about it, so.
Okay, well, go ahead. We're here.
Okay, so this is, if you're familiar with the property, it's the Joines property on County Road 7 and 4th Avenue West. And this, and you have in your packet a diagram showing the property, which is probably somewhat explanatory.
Didn't scan well.
It didn't scan super well.
Print's kind of nice.
Well, the dark aerial photo shows the 60 by 120 foot parcel that fronts on County Road 7. The property in fact, if you orient the property, the map to the north, then you can tell the house is located to the east of that, and the other lots would be located along 4th Avenue West. So the request is to create a 60 by 120 foot lot. The minimum requirements are 80 foot minimum width for a lot in the R1 zone district. This lot doesn't obviously have that, but it does meet the required 10,000 square foot, no, it doesn't.
It does actually. It's not 120. It's a misprint. It's a 200 foot.
200, yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
it does meet the.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about that.
So the lot does meet the required minimum lot area, it just doesn't meet the required lot width. The planning commission held a public hearing. We had some neighbors that were in attendance that came to kind of listen to what was being proposed. We had other neighbors that had expressed concern and reservations and were opposed to the requested variance because they felt it just might infringe on their properties, and those are the property owners to the west of the proposed lot. Those are all on lots that would be classified as substandard, but grandfathered in and allowed to be, used, and there's homes on those lots.
So with the setbacks and such that are required in the residential zone, how would a 60 by 200 lot be impacted as far as building area is concerned?
Well, they'd still be required to meet the required setbacks.
Right. So that would give a pretty skinny buildable area in the middle of the lot, wouldn't it?
Well, my lot's 60 by 90, so you can get a pretty decent sized house and still meet setback requirements.
Are you in R1? Are you in?
I'm in the
corridor?
RCN, which is right next door here, but I have the same setback requirements, 10,000 square foot minimums. Substandard. Yeah, so it leaves a 40-foot wide building area. It's a 10-foot setback on the east and west sides of it. And that, you can be pretty flexible with single family or duplex inside of a 40-foot
We do have a lot of lots in town, homes that are built on lots that are 40-foot, or less, certainly less than the 80 feet. Some as small as 25 feet, but if you go up First Avenue West, or even some of the lots on Broadway, lots are 40 feet wide, and there's homes built on those.
They have to provide off-street parking for all houses, is that correct? Did I see that in one of the?
Off-street parking we do require for any new residential construction, yeah.
Okay, and I can see that there's like the property owners to the west. Obviously, they built some of that stuff before the zoning ordinance was in, or they got a variance themselves to build so close to the property line, because it seems like the garage is.
That is a outbuilding?
That's a garage.
Metal storage.
Metal
built,
outbuilding.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and
not
it's-
attached to the
And that's
house?
built right up to the property line.
It was
Yeah.
actually
It's-
done by my aunt
yeah.
and uncle.
It's close. I don't know,
Can't tell you
that
what
it's
year.
right on it.
80s?
This aerial photography is not quite that accurate, but yeah, we would allow a building like that to be as close as 2.5 feet to a property line without asking for a variance.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'd make a motion to approve the Bowen variance request.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I struggle with it a little bit.
Tell me more.
Having 5, I'm good with the 4. I struggle with the 5. When I go back and look at our R1 a little bit, when it talks about an attractive residential environment, protecting property values, of the people around them, I struggle with putting this in there and having so many so close together in that spot. Like I said, the 4 don't bother me. I recognize that we need the homes. Having 4 there is somewhat similar to what's, behind them on the east side, but I struggle with trying to get that extra home in the spot.
So the 4 are put in. The 4
Stacked.
lots are like this.
Going
right?
north-south,
Yeah.
so to
Which is a
speak.
typical layout.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's only, 3 or 4 units similar to this 5th lot in the town right now
Right.
that are mid-block, where our kind of alleys typically go on more the east side of town.
Right.
And so it's just a different layout than splitting a block, along the avenues with yards and potential alley or utilities running through the middle.
Yeah.
Part of what's unique about this is kind of the conjunction of 2 different subdivisions. I believe this is a section line, and as the section line is kind of the remnant piece of.
You can just see that where these are strange looking blocks. Maybe you can't see it. But that's what Tim's talking about, is that the west side of the lot that's in question is actually on a section line. And so there's just, the stuff to the west of it was part of one
Gotcha.
plat addition, and the stuff to the east of it was part of another, but it didn't make any sense when they did plat it to cut this up. This is original village plat stuff
here. So that those chunks in the middle are just a remnant from that. They really weren't designed to be an alley like most of our other blocks have. And yeah, it's kind of, that's one of the things that makes this a very unique layout and situation. And it's just this block and the block below it where it's got that configuration.
So the variance really is just for just 10 feet on either side, is really it,
Well, it's
right?
it's the width, and, you know,
Because-
they still have to meet the required setbacks, so they have 40 feet in the middle to locate that house, and of course, it's how they orient it. If they orient the house north-south, you know, with the width on the street,
Mhm.
that shouldn't be any problem. I mean, they shouldn't have any problem building a home on that lot. There's many homes in town that are built on
Much smaller.
much smaller lots.
Right.
Yeah.
And
It's just, you know, how much do you want to look into your neighbor's windows and see and do, and again, you know, I know who's interested in buying land. I have no issue with that person. I think that they do good work. But when I think about being neighborly, that's where this pops in my head, is to say, is this really what we want to start putting out, as just, we need housing, so let's stack them on top of each other, and it doesn't matter whose windows you're looking in or how it's done. Is this the direction that we want to go? And I think if we make this available, it opens up the door again for somebody else and another person to come in and do that. I know myself, I own 3 city lots, so, you know,
I think you're right on the question. There's been lots and lots of tension about our lack of housing. And this is, in my opinion, the easiest solution that we have available to us is to create more density. And then you have to decide, well, what effects of that are you willing to live with? What rules
Right.
do you need to put in place to mitigate that? But this is where our housing is going to come from, is increased density. We can't afford to build new utilities to solve our housing problem, and here it is sitting there, ready to get used.
right, but when I look at town and I look what's occurring past Homestead and what we're putting in there, and I've driven over there to look at it, the city street per se that you drive on to go there is not much of a street. That's our responsibility. And at the end of the so-called street, it's not a very aesthetically pleasing neighborhood. I don't know who would be really too interested in buying or staying there for very long. I don't know if the houses are already pre-bought or not, if people have purchased. But again, I go back to, and this may come in, I don't know if it bodes me that I'm from here or if it's against me, but I look at what we've done and where we're going, and 4 houses is great, but do we need to stick the 5th one in? And if it's short-term, how do we know how long they'll be, or is it people constantly coming in and out? I mean, they're not setting them up to turn around and resale at this time, correct?
We don't even have the conversation about that.
Yeah, because it's not purchased by the people that are asking for the variance, right?
And
It's
it's
potential.
It's not, you know, what their immediate intentions are isn't really relevant to the variance
Right.
question either. So we don't know. We don't even ask that question.
Right.
We know that it has to be used residentially, which means they'll either have to be rented on a monthly basis or longer, or they can be sold to-
As individual
as individually
lots.
owned properties. Yeah.
So yeah, when I looked at the R1, and again, what came in our packets isn't all completely there. I go back to an attractive residential environment, and I think I lived in the house on the corner in the apartment building. Grew up having, you know, family functions at the house below. I'm very familiar with the Joinses and how long that it's been there. I watched today the Public Utilities meeting and all the discussion. But I struggle with putting an extra 5th lot in there just to create an extra space. I just need to go on record and say it,
Yeah.
and think that we need to have more of a discussion as to, there's no quick solution to the problems, because I don't think we have a lot of young families here. We aren't attracting any young families here. We have some homes, not enough. we can't find people to fill the jobs. I've never seen the paper have so many ads as I did last week. I don't know when the last time was that I saw that many ads, and we can't find people to come and live here and work. And it's a vicious circle. I don't know where we jump off the hamster wheel per se, but I have to come out and say I'm not in favor of trying to stick 5 homes in there, even though it meets the requirements. That's just how I feel.
Yeah, and I guess I would take just that opposite position. This is the opportunity that we have as a city to take an area that is served by city sewer and water and utilize it to its full potential. And, you know, when we talk about affordable housing, you know, if we say, well, you can only develop four homes on that property, it just means that the value of those lots becomes that much higher because you spread the cost over 4 lots rather than 5, and that affects the affordability of properties. And when we start, I think that the 80-foot requirement is an overreach on the city's part, requiring that size lots, because we know what it costs to put in sewer and water, and to think that we would be able to do that and create properties that would be affordable is pretty unrealistic. And I think this is our opportunity to actually make a site more affordable than it would otherwise be if they had to meet all the requirements of the ordinance. So this is, you know, my take on it. It's a shock for us. It doesn't mean that we do this universally, because there are very few places like this
Yeah.
that have the potential to be developed in this manner.
That would be part of my look on it too, is that, you know, we have to be very careful about decisions we make because of the precedent that it carries to other properties that share similar characteristics. This this property, I think, is unique in the fact that it isn't a typical property in the city, because a lot of those properties have already been broken down into smaller substandard lots. You know, that was done in the 60s and 70s largely. And to me, I see it has the square footage that's necessary to make it a lot. It just doesn't have the width. And setting a home in there and making it be discreet for the people who live on the other, who border it. I don't think that's not really the thing that makes me nervous about it.
Well, it's not really
Yeah, that's not really our deal anyway.
If Carrie wants to build a house that has windows staring at the neighbors, who's gonna wanna buy a house that has windows staring at the neighbors? I mean,
It's
there's a
a bad
saleability aspect in what he's trying to do that's gonna generate a house that fits to the site, right? I mean, and the aspect of, what the city is basically doing is depending on private individuals to develop this land without the infrastructure expenditures by the city to try and solve the crisis or the problem that is happening in housing. You know, the density is the solution to affordability. You can't have, what is this, a 25,000 square foot lot with one house on it?
12,000.
Well, that is, but I'm talking the whole city lot, the
Yeah.
whole parcel. It's a big piece of land to have a single house putting on it.
No, I think it's
You
twice
can't-
that size.
Yeah, it could be, maybe it is.
50-some thousand.
So, yeah, it must be if you can end up with 5,
Yeah.
right? So, I'd say, I think it's great. I think it's, anybody that would go into it with the, I understand the concerns of the people that are there, that have the places on the corner, or the places that are adjacent to it to the west. But, we can't have it both ways. We can't have people come here if they don't have a place to live. We can't, and so far, the issues for trying to solve it are falling in the hands of just private individuals to take on the challenge. The EDA's done some part, but it's a slow turning ship, and private individuals willing to step up and take on that. I think it's great. I think it helps 5 more houses that are being built with necessarily nobody. It's not a custom home for somebody. It's a house that I have no idea what's happening on the property for sure, but if you're gonna end up with 5 lots, my assumption would be that there'd be 5 houses. And if those are being built to be marketed and sold, those are 5 houses that are gonna come on the market, you know, that are gonna be energy efficient. They're not gonna be dumps. They're not gonna be places that have been tagged onto for the past 40 years. You know, they're quality, they're what we wanna try and find in our house to help improve the housing stock in this town, because the housing stock in this town is terrible. You know, it's why it's such a challenge. It's why prices are so expensive. So,
Prices are expensive because 40 years ago we built it as a retirement place. And that's what we struggle with.
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of characteristics go into that.
But the lack of, I mean, the lack of development for sale is a big driver in that, because anything that does get, you know, I mean, anything that does get bought and built custom for somebody, that now is generally, if it's a new, you know, new construction that's made for a particular person, and they're doing it not to take it and flip it, they're taking it because this is where they want to be. You know, and so it puts it off, takes it off the market for a certain amount of time. The prospect of whatever the time frame is on this, having 5 homes that potentially could come in at what I understand being in the, you know, more affordable realm, right? I mean, that's a big question.
I don't know,
what
and
the
that's
affordable-
something that we don't have.
And it doesn't matter.
We don't have privilege
doesn't
to.
matter.
And again, I don't like even having the names sometimes because I don't want people to think, well, she did a favor for this person and not that person.
But there,
It's-
yeah, and we
it's
have
about-
precedent, I mean, we already have
Yeah.
precedent as a council of, I mean, there's the lot on 8th Avenue below Jan's house. I mean, that lot, I mean, it's very similar, that didn't meet the width requirements. I don't even think it met the square footage requirements, but it was granted the conditional use to build a home on, right? I mean, that's something we
I'm
did.
sure it's happened more than that, too.
Right, I'm just thinking of our, you know, things that we've done, I mean, so, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, this idea of precedent, there's a finding that you need to make that's in this resolution that's talking about the uniqueness of the situation too. And so what Tim said is, you know, he generally supports this, but you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. That's true. Anytime somebody wants to come and look at this, we don't merely rely on our pattern, well, we did it for them, we have to do it for them. We have to look at the individual circumstances each time. So don't feel bound by what happens here.
I'm not.
So does anybody else have any further discussion they'd like to bring up?
I just want to address that the neighbors of this property did address in a letter that they're opposed to it. And that gave me some concern, just because that's a tough place to start a project with people opposing the project. I didn't know maybe if Tim or Anton, if you would be able to address any of their concerns.
Well, like I said, you know, almost, I think all of those lots that, those that expressed their reservations about it and an objection to this variance are all substandard lots. And if we use the same standards, you know, I don't know what their argument would be. I mean, yes, that they are closer than they would be if they were on a larger lot. But if this was, if they built this house 10 feet from this property line and this was an 80-foot lot, the appearance or the visibility from those neighbors would be the same. You know, was some concern about a area in the center of the parcel or the lot that, you know, collected water. You know, I mean, I can't really speak to that. They were concerned about how that might, you know, function in the future.
So even if it were, let's say, split into 4 lots, then they were just longer, the setbacks, you could still have a house the same distance from that neighbor's property line
Yes.
as you would with this
Yes.
60-foot property.
At least the top one would be that configuration. There's going to be 2 25-foot setbacks and 2 10-foot
Yep.
setbacks. So if they were all lining up back to back, they would actually be 25 each. But I don't think that those existing homes are 25 feet from the
Right.
property
No,
line.
they're not.
So,
Well, and you can see on the map or the aerial photo that the one large metal building is, you know, I mean, almost directly on the property line. So, you know, I mean, I doubt anybody's going to a builder would build adjacent to that within 10 feet of that, because why would you want to build adjacent to a house that's right on the property line?
Sure.
Or a garage that's right on the property line.
So I have a question that's kind of ancillary, but it might be good information to know. So the minimum lot size is 80 by what?
25.
It's 75 by 120
75 by
and
120.
10,000 square feet.
And
'Cause
10,000.
75 by 120 isn't 10,000 square feet.
Is it an and or?
It's got to be 75 wide, 120 deep, 10,000 square feet. Got to meet all three.
So those four lots that are going to be facing forth, how deep are those? Do we know?
125 will be the narrowest ones. So they'll be 80 by 125. The larger ones are more like 135. So the one down at the bottom.
So there really isn't room to suck some length or depth off of those to make this one deeper. I mean, now we're micromanaging. but-
Really, that's the.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's
That's
the
not the
same thought
purpose.
process I think we all went through when we're looking at this on paper. Is
Right.
what's the most appropriate, least complicated solution to this issue of how do you turn 50,000 square feet into 5 buildable lots? And, without replatting it, really, there isn't a better way, I think, to do it than this. So.
Well, and the planning commission talked about, additional setbacks on the west property line to see if that would, but then again, it seemed like we were again micromanaging, and it seemed like leaving the developer to develop in a fashion that allows the best use of the property is, makes the most sense, rather than us not from being familiar specifically with the property, to say maybe a 15-foot setback would address the concerns raised by the neighbors. In the end, we felt that leaving the setbacks and leaving the rest of it as the ordinance requires, and just going with the variance for this particular lot was the most appropriate action.
One of the neighbors did bring in a drawing where they said, what if he did it this way? Just exactly what you were talking about. Is there a different way to arrange this?
Mhm.
And then it's 6 variances to get you there. And maybe it doesn't solve the problem anyway, right? You still have the same density when you're done, so.
I struggle with if we don't do a variance on this. I struggle with the fact that then that space is likely going to be underused or not used at all for its purpose, the purpose of residence.
We don't know if, I don't know, and I don't expect Carrie to tell us, that's really none of our business. We don't know if they could decide to say, hey, we're still gonna go ahead and build 4, or somebody else says, hey, I can still come in and do this. I don't know if it's up to us to decide. I don't wanna feel pressured for somebody to sit here and say, well, if you don't do it, I'm not gonna do this. I don't know what's behind the person. If they chose to pass, what's the next person gonna say? Or if we said no, would the current person say, hey, I can understand what they're saying, work within this, and this is what I want to change and do?
Yeah, and none of that conversation
Yeah.
has occurred
No,
at all. So-
Yeah, nor is it really
Shouldn't.
appropriate.
Really, most of the conversation centered around this particular application
Mm-hmm.
for this particular lot, and it really didn't raise much concern with the other 4 lots at all. So 90% of the conversation had to do with just specifically this.
Mhm. Does anyone have any other conversation or any other discussion about it? Bit of a pickle. Well, we have a motion and we have a second on the table for this. If there's no further discussion, we'll bring it to a vote. All in favor, wait a minute, we have a number, don't we?
Yeah, 2018-10.
10. All in favor of, is that resolution? Sorry, I
Yeah.
can't find it. There it is. Resolution 2018-10. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Carries 4-1. There we go. Very, very good conversation, I think. So we'll move on to the next one. So the next one, yep. Next one moves to the other side of town to discuss an in-home occupation or in-home business on, this is Second, isn't it? Second Avenue East, yep.
Yes.
And so what we're talking about having a business that would have some additional people living at the home, correct? That would be working for the business.
Well, maybe to
Did I
explain
put that in
it,
there?
the proposed application is for a conditional use permit to conduct a home business, which would be conducted in a garage on the premises by residents of the premises. Carolyn Dry owns the property, and she would have students that she would bring from Winona, somewhere, that would be part of this operation. They would be living in the home while working there. And the ordinance does allow conditional use permits for home businesses. We've granted a number of those in town. And generally, these are for types of businesses that are, for the most part, compatible or, really not discernible that they're actually operating in a residential district. And I just read the definition of a home occupation, just so you get a clear understanding as what it is that we're talking about. It's any use customarily conducted entirely within a dwelling or accessory building and carried on by members of a family residing therein. And you'll see in the information that a family does include any number of individuals living on that property. So it's not necessarily the family.
Relation.
Yeah.
And this is like an actual real business. Like this is a real thing.
And we'll talk about that just a little bit here. So it's carried on by members of a family residing there, and which is clearly incidental and secondary to the use of the dwelling for dwelling purposes, and does not change the character thereof. That goes on to mention a bunch of types of things that are not allowed to be home businesses. But so what I understand is what Carolyn is doing is she has some kind of service that she's research or something that she's doing that's using technology and 3D printers. And maybe Mike, you might help me explain this, because it's not really clear what the end product is. But she's an engineer, I believe, that is doing this work to. I'm not sure what the end is of it, but and this request is to allow her to do this within this garage building, to determine if the work is the type of work that she can sustain up here on a regular basis. I mean, she owns the home. She wants to use it, the garage, for this use. The use of the garage would not produce anything that would be noticeable to the neighbors, no fumes, noise, odors, that type of thing, which specifically would be a concern if they were changing the appearance or the kind of the condition of the neighborhood. We did have neighbors that expressed support, and we also had neighbors that expressed non-support and opposition to the request. And we had a lengthy discussion about this. In the end, the Planning Commission recommended on a unanimous vote to support the conditional use request with a termination date of September 30th. And basically, that was done in order to allow her to conduct this kind of experimental operation to determine if whatever she's doing would be able to be taken to a different level, and, you know, she would then maybe move that business to another location in the community. Would
I
it
did-
require that she provide off-street parking?
And that's missing from the resolution that was distributed with your packet. So there's a misprint, first of all, in that resolution that calls the property R1 in the first finding.
Okay.
And it's not, it's referred to correctly in the description as R2. There's also the 3 conditions that the planning commission attached that should be in this resolution, so hopefully when you consider it with the first condition that all the activities are conducted within the premise, the accessory garage premises. 2, that they would provide 3 off-street parking spaces, and 3, that the permit would expire on September 30th, 2018.
That makes it a lot clearer.
And you'll see there's an additional letter that was just handed out tonight from Mary Sanders, who's the adjacent neighbor to the south of this property. Well, you can see it and read it.
Well, what do you guys think about this?
I'd make a motion in support of 2018-11.
There's a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second, any further discussion? I am completely in favor of the conditions. I think that makes it a lot clearer and makes it something that's a lot easier to support. So,
And I think in the future, having a time restriction on this is really kind of neat, and there's a lot, I like what I think the plan is here, kind of with the spent waste 3D printing, could turn into something cool.
You probably understand this better than.
yeah, I'm sure he does. He's
Yeah,
doing
Jonathan, give us a lesson.
I just Googled it.
Yeah.
And, but for a lot of these things, for anyone here that has an idea that could potentially work out of their garage for 4 months and bring some people in, see if it works, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
think
pretty cool.
we're not gonna just change it so everyone can have businesses in their garages, but for a test run period, I think it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it also
You might
gives
be
us,
surprised how many people have businesses in their garages within a block of this location.
there's quite a few.
And much less objectionable to a garage band.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've been there too.
Well, and her hope was if this takes off, that she may look for other property in the area to.
Right.
Another place to do it, yeah.
So that, there's no guarantee, right? If this takes off, she could come back and ask for another conditional use permit to continue in the garage, and then you could have an opportunity with some experience that the neighbors would be able to help us
Right.
understand, did this work or not? But
And
there's
that's,
also the growth opportunity that I think is quite exciting.
Yeah.
that's really the thing that I like about the termination date on it, is
Yeah.
that then when, if and when she seeks to renew, then we can go back to that, to the neighbors and say, how did this go?
Yeah.
Because then that's a lot easier to have that conversation, knowing that there's actually some way to, she has to go through the process again. So I think that's good. So
And I just have to say that we had the best turnout at that planning commission meeting that we've had in a very long time. And with with Patrick on board, we've been talking about we want to do a better job of getting people involved in the processes. And my personal opinion is the process is fairly broken. The idea that we just have a public hearing, people show up at that time, and that's their one crack at it, seems crazy. And then before we've done anything different, suddenly we've got 30 people at a meeting, and maybe I'm wrong. So keep it up, folks, and we won't bother you with anything other than what we're doing.
that's great. Anything else? Any other comments? Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of 2018-11 with the conditions as discussed?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. All right.
Can I add one more thing on to the planning commission report as
After.
well? Well, either that will come under staff or
No,
council
go ahead.
reports, but the planning commission also did talk about the downtown first floor lodging issue. And some of you may have seen this, but the city sent out a survey to downtown business owners and property owners requesting they fill out a survey regarding first floor lodging. That survey is available online, so if anybody you know is interested in filling that out, they can go online and get that survey and fill it out. I think the deadline for completing it, though, is the end of next week, so we can get this information back to the Planning Commission and try to compile that and start to come up with some ideas or recommendations about, whether we want to take some action or do something with regard to the issue.
And Patrick's going to actually be visiting properties to give people an opportunity to participate too that didn't make the mailing list. There's not a whole lot of them, so we can, with some minimal effort, hopefully get very high participation.
I want to decipher a little. When you say issue, we don't actually have an issue, correct? There's a discussion.
We're talking
that?
about people's, experiences with first floor lodging and what do they like about it, what are they concerned about. That's basically the survey. We're also doing some research about if other communities have dealt with this issue, and particularly on the retail aspect more than the lodging is where we're finding some of it. And we're just going to present the data that we find to the Planning Commission, and then they'll make a determination. Is there a need to do something different, or are we okay with what's going on now?
Yeah, and when I speak of issue, it's that the Planning Commission has identified this because of the questions and concerns brought to the Planning Commission that we wanted to further that conversation.
Right.
Issue only in the respect that we're talking about
Yeah.
this
Discussion.
Yeah. I just want people to understand that there's nothing happening right now.
Yeah, good. That's
that-
very good.
That made this move forward. There's no one that we know of
Well, we did have a
identified.
request.
That was the request.
There was a request from the Downtown Business Council that we think about this.
Right, but no business has come to us and said, hey, I want to do this. Is that correct?
It already's happened.
Well, I mean, that's what happened with Stefan's
Yeah.
Oh.
studio. And
Sure.
But there wasn't a development proposal that triggered our looking
Okay.
at this issue, no.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Moving right along. You guys are up. Come on up. Tell us who you are. Tell us what you got. So this is our North House update for the year.
Sure is.
You're gonna
Not
wow
much going
us.
on, really.
Yeah, that's what I
How's it
heard.
going? Hi, you guys.
Kind of keeping the.
I'm
same
Frank,
old same.
right? Kelly, I don't know if I've met you before.
Probably have not. Nice
Pleasure.
to meet you.
Thank you. Met all the rest of the crew. I'm the director of North House. These two fellas, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Buck Benson, and I'm no longer on the board. I served my 6 years for North House, but I'm still involved. And I was involved in what we're going to discuss at a certain level, so that's why I'm here.
I'm J.D. Lair from Lutzen. I'm just finishing up my second year on the board at North House, and just recently we got our facilities working group back functioning again, and I'm the co-chair of that along with Mike Prom. And that kind of plays into, I think, some of the things we're going to talk about tonight, the dockside acquisition and our plans for the future. So,
Great. So, just to kind of explain why we're here, we sit on a part of our campus sits on parcel of city-owned property. In the first years of North House, we got to rent it 6 months at a crack, which back then seemed like a pretty good deal. And we did that for 4.5 years. And then we wrote a first 5-year lease, which after 6 months seemed like a really long time. And then shortly after that 5-year plan was launched, maybe 2 years in or so, we started a conversation about can we go longer because we were going to launch our first capital campaign, and is anybody going to give money to a project that's got 5 years? And the obvious answer was no. And so a new 25-year lease was written that, in theory, automatically renews as long as we meet some performance criteria. And one of the terms was we get to come by and say hi once a year, whether you want us to or not. So here we are. First of all, I think you guys got this in the packet, and that's you guys didn't. So here you go. You guys can have one. I don't know if everybody's seen our recently released annual report, but I'll hand this around too. If you don't have a copy, please feel free.
So for my information, when does this 25-year lease expire? Or when did
We
it
have
start? Maybe
13
that's the
more
way to
years?
look at it.
Sure, so we are, when we were about 9 years old, and we're
Okay.
21 now, something like that.
Yeah.
So we're 12 years in, 13 years in.
Okay.
And, yeah, good question. And the 3 performance criteria are based on number of student user days, size of our endowment fund, students meaning momentum of mission, endowment meaning fiscal security, and then whether we've gotten any letters about how we're caring for the campus from the city or not, and whether we've taken action on those. And so that's so it's about our programmatic momentum, our fiscal health, and the nature of our relationship is what the measures are. That's kind of how they got structured. Do I have those right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
so let's first of all, I think there's 3 subjects on our agenda. One is to talk a little bit about how North House is doing. It's always a good thing to share. 2 is to talk a little bit about the recent handoff of the dockside property, and to make sure you guys feel fully informed. And then 3 is to talk a little bit about where we're at and where we think we're going, because that's always helpful to talk about too. So in our packet, first of all, some data about how we're doing. First chart basically shows student days, and this is catalog coursework. 1 student in a 1-day class generates 1 user day. That should be pretty obvious. 1 student in 3-day class generates 3 user days. 3 students in a half-day class generate 1.5 user days, right? So it's hard to know exactly what 100 user days mean. It probably doesn't mean 1 student in a 100-day class, though. Right, and so what shows each month of the year, for the past 5 years, how many user days in each month. This doesn't include school programs. It doesn't include the recent community blacksmithing classes. It doesn't include work study. This is catalog coursework. People are signed up for our core coursework that's in this thing, right? And you can see many of the months grow, and the chart right below shows the running total. And so if you look over to the right, you can see that in December, or by the close of 2013, we generated just over 4,000 student user days. By comparison, by the close of 2017, we generated 5,500 student user days. North House has grown every year of our existence except for one. That year was 2009, which everybody knows what happened then. So steady growth is part of the story of the school. And if you flip to the next page, page 3, which starts out 2018 booked enrollment received by month, this shows when the phone calls come in to book coursework. We launch a catalog March 1st. We launch a catalog September 1st. And the simple question is, do people pay attention? I think the chart speaks for itself. In the past, and it doesn't have April on it, but April also set a new record. So in the past 4 months, actually if you look back into December and November, in the past 6 months, 5 of the 6 months have sent new booking records for us. That's sobering. That's satisfying. And I think it speaks loudly about, is the work that North House is doing generating attention in the world? It is. It's a pretty exciting place to be, and it creates a little internal tension. How do you take care of all these people who want to get in class? Because 40% of our classes last year filled to capacity. So we flip to one more page, and this says 2010 to 2017 student days by month, year-round. And what this does, instead of looking for a running total, it looks at capacity or participation by month. Just not year over year, but comparing the years. And you'll notice, look at January, sloping up from left to right. Look at February, sloping up from left to right. Look at March, sloping up from left to right. Right? Look at May, sloping up from left to right. And look at the summer. Interestingly, summer, well, certainly some peaks, pretty flat, actually. North House's programmatic momentum, where is it happening primarily now? In what some people might call the off season, which isn't as a non-existent phenomenon at North House now. We're a school that runs coursework year round, and indeed, if you look at, for instance, February or even March, and you compare it, trace across to August, we're actually busier in February and March than we are in August. This is a great thing for North House. It happens to, I think, help local businesses as well. It's a good trend. So our growth is happening in every month of the year, and a big part of that driver is our special events, our thematic weekends. Last month we hosted what's called the Timber Framer Gathering. We had 120 students on campus for 3 days. Why? Because we've become the Midwest destination for learning traditional timber framing. What a privilege. And we've partnered with that, with the Timber Framers Guild. So lots of good things going on. A couple other just pieces in here, and I'll share a couple other things going. Just share a couple other things. We've just hired 3 new staff people. One half-time person who works in our front office and helps manage a bunch of administrative tasks. Rachel Andrus, whose husband Ian teaches for us. And we've also brought in 2 people, a technology manager named Justice Greneau, who's come from Ashland and is working for us, and Thomas Morris, who's moved in from Indianapolis, has come in as our development director. Today we announced 2 additional openings for a grants manager and a finance director. So we had 2.5 people leave last year, replaced them, but also adding 2 positions. So North House is growing. Pretty exciting time, pretty interesting time at the school. That said, we have an interesting project going forward that, as Buck mentioned and JD mentioned, that we, at this time last year, we would have just started our conversations. A year ago, Harley Tofty and Shelley Tofty came by to say, we're getting ready to retire. Do you guys want to sit down for coffee, or should we go find a realtor? And that's a pretty neighborly thing to do. And we weren't quite sure why we said it, but we said we better have coffee. And I don't know how many months it took to figure. How many months did it take to figure it out, Buck?
Well, it took a while because it's a big chunk for a small little school like North House to even consider that we could possibly do that, because even though we're growing very rapidly, there's always growing pains and there's not a lot of cash laying around. So it took a lot of work by a number of people, but mostly by Greg, to push this thing forward, really, and to get to where we're at.
The funding for it.
And it also took a lot of cooperation from Shelley and Harley, and when you said they were ready to retire, that's very true. Harley was going to retire from fishing regardless of what happened, if it sold or didn't sell. Mm-hmm. And Shelley has gone through an awful lot of work to build that business up, and I think we all recognize that and how important that business and Harley's fishing is to the community and what people think of Grand Marais. I know I grew up, Kelly, you grew up with the same thing. There was a lot of fishermen in this area and a lot of fishermen just down in this harbor, and now the last one would be disappearing. And so one of our focuses when we were looking at making this purchase and dealing with Harley and Shelley was definitely that we did not want those things to disappear. And thanks to them and also to our board and everybody having a community value to that process, we are able to say right now that both those things are happening and will continue to happen. And we feel very happy, and I think Greg should be proud that he was able to make all this happen. So at North House, we're feeling very good about this. JD?
Want me to say a few words about the master planning process?
Yeah, that'd be
Greg?
good. Yeah.
I think it was one of our major funders, also give us some funding to carry out a master plan for the entire North House campus. So it was sort of a condition of them supporting the purchase of dockside. They wanted to make sure that we were going to make the most use out of the parcel and make sure we could integrate that with our existing program and with our existing campus. So we wrote up an RFP and received 5 proposals from a variety of firms. Some were Duluth-based, some were Twin Cities-based, some were very small firms, and some were some quite large firms, but we winnowed that down. We interviewed all of them, actually, and ended up picking LHB, a Duluth-based firm, but with a Twin Cities presence. The group we're working with are mainly based in the Twin Cities, and we kicked that off, what was it, a week ago, Greg, last week? And the product, just less than a year, I guess, is when we'll have a final product, but obviously they're going to be reaching out to stakeholders in the city. You folks, the city government, and the residents of the city are also all stakeholders in what goes on with North House in the future. So we're going to be, during this process, we're going to be asking for both your input as the governing people and the residents of the city to contribute to the planning process.
So yeah, so the plan is to have some master plan document prepared and presented to both to the board and then to the community in January next year. So it's about a 10-month, based on when, depending on how you count from where we start to where we finish, or 9-month process. So, yeah. So, a lot happening at North House right now, I think. A lot to be proud of. A lot of people have worked pretty hard. Very gratifying in the sense of, one, to have neighbors who are willing to sit down for coffee more than once. That's satisfying. 2, to have funders, because pretty much any and every funder we approached, we said, here's the opportunity, and they said, the universal reaction was, you have to go. I mean, the only way forward is that way, and we'll be there. And some have stepped up pretty aggressively, you know, like IRRB, EDA collaborated on that, the Margaret A. Cargill Foundation has kind of led the charge. We have several other requests out, but you know, our new grants manager position funded by the Northland Foundation, the new technology person funded by the Lloyd K. Johnson program. So, and why? Why are these new staff needed? Certainly present tense, but the point is actually future tense. We got to grow the internal capacity of the school. So if we're going, so as we chart our course, we'll have the ability to keep moving forward. So that's really the growth that's happening right now, is trying to anticipate the next couple of years. That's really key. So that's you know, there's some numbers back here on the back if you're curious about where the money comes from and where it goes. But questions?
Can you explain a little bit about the continuation of the fishing operation and the dockside operation?
Great. So along the way, we probably talked to 4 or 5 different potential people interested in the project.
In the restaurant part.
In the restaurant project. And because we put together, in a sense, similarly, an RFP. So we realized we might be talking to more than one player here. And Harley and Shelley helped us meet a couple. And then we had a couple in-house, and then we just had a couple people just approach us cold, which is wonderful. And as we talked, you know, we knew we were looking for somebody with experience in the restaurant world, with experience in the fishing world, ideally. Somebody who we felt, you know, Shelley told us multiple times, you know, if they'll have me, I want to stay involved. I want to, you know, my goal is to see Dockside continue to move forward. And so Marais Seafood Markets, Steve Frank and his family actually contacted Shelley and Harley first and said, you've sold? Seriously? Actually, I think it was, you're selling? Seriously? And they, you know, their family's grown. They've got 2 family restaurants that have thrived over in the neighborhood, and they were looking for a third place. And so we started a conversation, and they prepared, you know, there's a fair amount of going back and forth about what information they needed to get a look at it and everything. And then, you know, ultimately, once we came to terms, they invited Shelley and her team over to see their other 2 stores so they could understand what that adventure has looked like, and they've been over here just on a I don't know if you stopped in, but Steve and Paul are, right there all the time. I think they're over here like 4 days a week right now. So they opened on the 26th. Soft opening, hard opening May 1st, and off we go. And then Tyler Smith, who fished with Harley since he's been age 14, one day said to Harley, well, if you're going to sell, maybe I ought to go talk to those guys. Or something
That sounds kind of
about like
how
it.
he would
Yeah, and we're off to a great start. Another fisherman similarly. Okay, oops, now I'm kind of working the name. There'll be a second fisherman on the dock as well a little later this spring. So that's good news.
He has historically fished out of there.
Yeah, he too has fished,
It's
but
that-
during shorter
that-
periods of time with Harley and Shelley. So
there'll be two separate licenses? or-
there's actually three, because Tyler has a license, his brother Zachary has a license, and this other gentleman, oh gosh,
Somebody Nelson from Bison?
Brisen, Brisen,
Eric Brisson?
Eric Brisen.
Brisson, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
is going to also fish.
Wow.
So, which feels pretty good.
And we're finding room for them on our dock, and also the little fish house that sits down there. So we're being, and of course Steve has found room at dockside, also underneath dockside, to help them process their fish.
Okay.
So we're working with those people to make this happen, really. And Harley has been working to make it as easy as possible for them to transition in. So we're hopeful. You're never going to catch the same amount of fish with the same effort as you do on the South Shore. But if we find somebody interested here in town, that's what we would like to see. And I think everybody would.
Yeah.
Fresh fish every day, so.
Yeah, and because I definitely, when we came back and we're talking about this, and otherwise, we certainly heard three clear messages from the community. What's going to happen to my fish market? That was the first question. It's our fish market too. Second is, what's going to happen to my fishermen? Right, and then the third is, well, what about the property taxes? And obviously, is just to make it clear, but to say publicly, while this North House will continue to pay property tax on this property. Why? Because it's being used for commercial purposes. The only property that becomes or moves towards exemption is the property we then start to utilize to support our educational mission. And so a portion of it down by the water, the steel building is going to become a classroom eventually. So that'll eventually become property tax exempt, which is what it's supposed to do, because that's who we are. But the restaurant, it's being a restaurant, will continue to pay property tax, generate local property tax, which is good. So, so did that answer?
Yep, it did. Yeah, I mean, because I think, as you said, those are questions that went around the community when I think they heard that, Harley and Shelley were thinking about selling, is what would happen to that, and if North House bought it, what happens then, and how does this work? And, obviously, we, saw the article in the paper, and, people that have stopped in and been into the dockside have seen that, it's still the dockside, and, that's, which is good. I mean, I think it's community, I think, felt some reassurance that the dockside will still be there, that will be operated similarly to what it had been, and that the commercial fishing will continue, and to see these young guys step up, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So the RFP, I was just going to add that the RFP process was used to help guide that. We didn't want to see any great deviation from what, we liked the dockside fish market the way it was. We didn't want to open it up and have another pizza joint in town or a place that serves burgers. We wanted
Did
something
Shelley share her recipes for chowders?
She's still there. I'm glad to hear she's staying on, because when I went there,
Well,
I've eaten there
she's
twice
there.
already.
For a while.
She's there through June. I mean, she's
Okay.
part of the handoff.
Good for her. Good
Part of
for
the
her.
handoff. So yeah. Yeah, it's a good thing. It's great to have her there. Other questions?
I got none.
Nice work.
I
Yeah,
think this is
I think it's really
awesome.
exciting.
The numbers are just very impressive.
So here, actually, I do have a question. So with the addition of the additional classroom space and additional space for North House, where does that leave you in meeting the 3 criteria that are on the 25-year lease? Like, is that because your endowment was not far from the requirement the last time we talked several months ago, and your student days, I believe, already exceed the
Yeah, I think we're like at,
number.
yeah, I guess we're at, you know, one we're maybe at 85% of where we need to be, and the other I think we're at 75%. I don't think we've actually exceeded either of the thresholds, but halfway through. You know, so one could argue we're doing very well, and I haven't gotten a letter yet, so I guess maybe we're mostly getting along.
You haven't gotten a letter saying that you're not taking care of the property.
Joking, but I'm serious.
It's like, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, you haven't gotten a letter. That's the whole.
So
point,
yeah, so the given current trends, we're well positioned. I think would be one simple way to say it.
Cool.
So
Nice. Well,
good.
anybody else have any other questions or comments or anything?
It's always good to get your report. It's always good to hear the good things that are happening down at North House. You know, I think, you know, the partnership has been a strong one, and I think for both of us it's been successful.
Yeah. Well, and
I appreciate
Well, thank
the work
you.
you guys do.
And I think there's going to be more to talk about. As you know, as Jade, you know, we've just started the master planning process. You know, this isn't really the end. This is the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, where to from here? It's a
Well-
question we're asking, but it's really a question for all of us in this community.
So
So,
when you get that back, then come see us again.
Hopefully you'll see it before
See it
then.
before.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully, yeah.
great.
Can I have one of those paper catalogs?
You can have. You sure can.
Please?
Yeah, he brought a stack.
Well, I don't need 10. I'll only read one. Thank
Great.
you.
All right.
Cool.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Gentlemen.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
very
guys.
much.
Thanks so much.
Have a good night.
Okay, so with that, we're moving on to council and staff reports, unless you have something else that you want to add. Do you have anything you want to add?
I can wait until you get right around to me.
Ooh.
Of course, it's 7:37, and I did put 7:35 on the agenda, so I don't know if we can keep going or not. I'm gonna leave that up
We
to
are
you.
going. So that snide remark is due to the fact that the last meeting we adjourned like right on the money for
Yeah.
when
nailed
it was proposed.
Oh, so Mike's off now this time a
We
little bit.
were a little bit more talkative.
I think I was
than he
probably off
anticipated.
last time, actually. It's much more common I get it this way.
Right.
You never know with the planning commission how that will turn out.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Correct. All right. So council and staff reports. Jonathan, what you got?
We had a park board meeting on the 1st and got a couple golf updates. We approved the purchase of a used mower that's going to replace a few older mowers that they have that are constantly breaking down and getting fixed.
$19,500 or something
Yep.
like that.
Yep, it's got three heads on it. You know, it can do elevated roughs and so that we had approved that. The kind of the bigger topic that we were talking about is the superintendent, Mike, is retiring at the end of the year, and sooner rather than later, we're trying to figure out what's the best way to go about finding a replacement.
Right.
And might ask for personnel committee, city hall, maybe Pat in your new position to help. It's seasonal work. It's
It's intensely seasonal work. I think would be
intensely
fair to say.
seasonal, and it's a quite specific skill set. You know, managing the business and greens and equipment maintenance. So there's a couple of different options that we're still kind of working on. There's no action items yet, but that's going to be coming down the pipeline soon. Trying to figure that out. There's, I guess, if you just wanted to hire a superintendent, then they wouldn't need any training. But we don't know if a superintendent for a golf club would want to move all the way up here for a 9-hole course to work just in the summer. But so that'll be a fun project that we get to figure out this next year. Let's see, there is a boat launch in the marina
Right about that.
that is, we decided just to not use that as a boat launch anymore and put in a 30-foot roll-in dock. It's gonna create two new docking spots for small boats and get about another $1,600 in marina revenue. So,
Do we already have that dock?
yeah, it's existing. It's just not in use somewhere else.
Are they gonna dredge that out a little bit?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dave was saying we're gonna spend less than $1,000 cleaning it up and prepping it for rolling the dock in.
They're gonna pull that concrete out of there, just leave it.
It depends.
Yes and no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes and no.
It's some and some, yeah.
Yeah.
We should entertain putting, like those big metal pipes that are filled with concrete in front of there. Just like put a couple of them there. Because otherwise people are gonna try and put their boats in there still.
There's gonna be some small signage. Yeah.
Well,
Or we could put the,
I don't know. We'll
Yeah.
sign it. Let's go with the signage.
Mhm.
If people start driving in there, then we'll have to.
Big boulders.
right now, there's about a 2-foot speed dip to get
Yeah.
from the driving way to the concrete.
Nobody's going to want to
So
do
you
that
can't-
if they
okay,
You
are.
can't get
Fair
a
enough.
tire.
They'll just do it once.
Yeah.
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 Fair enough.
So yeah, then we just again reapproved the use of Harbor Park for the art festival, and that was it.
I read something that said that the grass die off or the green die off or something like
Yeah.
that at
It was
the
a little-
golf course was bad this year, just
Yeah.
like a couple of years ago.
The worst it's been in 5 years. I think just from it was only a couple weeks ago they were snow blowing off the greens just to even get to them, because there are some spots where they're nice and shaded and the snow just held, and so there's, I don't know if it's just a couple greens that are in pretty rough shape, but he's still hoping to open on the 19th May, but fingers crossed.
Boy,
10 days.
yeah, that's a lot.
It's supposed to warm up next weekend again, so
Hopefully.
maybe,
Nice.
or next
That'd be
week,
great.
like by Monday. We'll see.
That's it.
That's it.
Anton?
We had an EDA meeting last night. The houses, first batch of houses rolled into town. Did you shoot the video of that, Jay?
I shot
Some
that
video
video.
of it?
Yes.
I saw another set come through 2 nights ago, I think. And so that's exciting. The sale of the property, the funding was secured for the sale of the block up top, the business park. So that is happening. Nisgoda Services is who bought that. And so they're gonna end up actually going in and kind of doing a little bit of a demonstration for us on the property to try and show what their services are, because they've been pretty active with the Firewise stuff. And at first they weren't gonna do a building, and now they're talking about doing a building, and but we'll kind of see how that plays out. But we sold a lot, and
That
it
was on
went
that
through
northwest corner,
top northwest corner, the one that's
Yeah.
bisected by the
the snowmobile
snowmobile trail.
Yeah.
It's a fine lot.
It's a big one.
10 acres or something.
It's 4.5.
4.5, yeah.
Yeah. 10.
Feels like 10. Feels like 10.
It's not good for the guy who's on the planning and zoning board.
He can't know everything.
4.5 and 10.
It's the largest lot up there.
Yeah, yeah, it is for sure. And what else is happening? The property that was sold to Spectrum for $1, whatever that agreement was, that's gone by the wayside, and they're not planning on proceeding with the assisted living facility up here.
So did they give us formal writing that they're canceling that agreement?
Well, it already canceled itself out because they didn't move on
Didn't
time.
move on it?
So,
Okay, so that those properties are available again.
yep,
Where's that?
that is
We're keeping
there's
that dollar, damn it.
New Gunflint Trail and County Road 7. There's a piece of private property there that's been for sale for some time. It's all wetlands. And then above that, it's Lot 3 and then Lot 2. And I think, so they're right and before the curve on the Gunflint there.
Below the Como storage tanks.
Below the Como
and
storage, and there's an outlet.
Most of
up
it is
there.
below the city ditch.
Okay.
And there's sewer and water service available to it.
And there was not any sort of request or ask of any type, but Sarah and Anna Hamilton were at the meeting just to talk about some ideas that they've had with trying to help with the housing situation and lack thereof. And so they had, an interesting concept to some plans. And again, they didn't, they weren't necessarily asking the EDA for anything, but being that the EDA is the county's housing authority, that's where they came to talk about it. And so they're working on forming a 501c to be able to try and come up with something to do. It seems similar to a land trust model, but working on planned unit development somewhere. But they definitely feel like they want it to happen within the city of Grand Marais, just because of access to city services. But again, no formal ask. They didn't, but they just were kind of, there'd been a buzz about it a little bit, so they wanted to just kind of get caught up and let everybody know where they were at on stuff. So that'll be, it's great, again, to see what they can come up with, and if it works, all the better. We got updates from Physical County talking about the funding that's been put out with the completion of Canyon at Superior National. They're golfing out there right now. River is not open, but I think it's supposed to be open soon.
This
maybe
weekend.
This weekend, I thought, yeah. So they were trying to, it's pretty cool. They're making a big deal of letting people know that you can go skiing at Lutz Mountains and golfing on the same day, which hasn't happened very many times. At least when the lifts are running, you could ski until July if you wanted to walk it. But yeah, so that was, they updated us on that. The grand opening, I should know what that date is, but I don't have it in front of me. There's the grand opening for the full 27, and that's, I want to say it's sometime in June. I should have that date.
I think
The
so.
19th?
I read
That
Sean's
sticks in my
stuff and I
head or
can't
something like that.
remember, but I think June is right.
And, yeah, later on in June. So, yeah, and they're just getting all their stuff in line to make that successful, and hope it doesn't rain. And yeah, I don't think, I had to leave early. I was only there for about an hour of the meeting, so. But I stuck it out here tonight, so.
Yeah,
You're
what
welcome.
really
Real
counts.
trooper.
Really counts.
Thank you. As long as Jay keeps it short.
Shows gumption. Lots of
That's
gumption.
it.
That's all I got.
Tim.
I guess one other thing with the planning commission too is that we're still looking for a fifth member. We've been without a fifth member on the planning commission for
About a year.
Speaking of the
quite a while, and it really is something we really need to try to figure out a way to fill. We have these issues that come before us that take a lot of conversation and discussion. It's always helpful to have full complement of commission members to do that. So if you know anybody that might be interested, have them get in touch with Mike. Anybody that's watching,
I have an idea, I just don't know if I do. I have to approach
Put them
them.
out now so that they'll be
Nope,
able to.
I'm not gonna do that.
There's
They should never ever
there's
speak to me
thousands of
again.
people watching right now. Get their names out there.
Thousands of people. Nope, they would never.
Thousands.
I could tell you.
how many?
Ambush
How many?
technique, that's better.
Is it double digits? Yeah. Right.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Anyway,
So that's it
yeah.
for the planning commission, but the other is that the,
Come on.
the Public Utilities Commission, we met this afternoon, and a couple things we talked about. One is a program we've been having conversations about for the last couple of years, and it's a metering infrastructure project that has to do with kind of getting into the next generation of metering of services. we just agreed to go ahead and pursue a pilot program that's working through SIMPA, our provider, and what's the organization?
The Missouri River Energy Services.
Yes, Missouri River Energy Services.
We really like
which-
to reach deep and far, don't we, for
Well, they-
southern Minnesota, Missouri.
Well, it's still Minnesota, believe it or not.
And so we're just going to start
MIS.
this pilot project with the purchase of 70 meters, which will get us kind of, involved with it. And this agreement will be for a year's period of time, at which time hopefully we'll, be looking to expand that system. And it's one that we've felt is going to be happening, at some point, and, seems to be the right time to have the city step up and start with this pilot project.
Do you need volunteers?
I tried out.
No,
Is it,
thank you.
No volunteers, so I guess there you see. Yeah.
We're still,
is it going on existing or new? How's it working?
yeah,
We don't know.
the pilot project will be 70 electric meters that will select regions that we want to test out. Probably the outskirts first, but also some neighborhood in the city, so we can also do a handful of water meters at the same time. And yeah, once that gets going, that's, we'll own the equipment forever. The deal he's talking about is a third-party data management, that we won't be handling the meter data. We'll be paying another utility consortium that works through SIMPA to host the software and the data for us, and
But
that'll make it a lot easier.
it probably will come up with more accurate stuff than what we see on our monthly bills, right?
I don't know if it's more accurate, but it'll certainly be more timely and a lot more available data. I mean, a business, for instance, that wants to know a lot more about their usage will be able to find out, almost real time what's going on. The bigger aspects of it is that we've had an organization designed around reading meters, processing data, mailing bills, and none of that's really necessary for us to do in-house anymore. And so that, combined with access to much better information for our customers, which a lot of them want now, and I suspect really most will be demanding in the near future, access to better data. This is why we're moving forward on this.
Yeah, and the timing was right, when Jan retired, obviously we hired Hayden, and our expectation is that he wasn't going to take over the same kind of role that
Right.
Jan carried. And so, getting into the automatic, meters,
Is there controllability aspects on that? So is it looking at the system that, like the meters themselves, to wonder if that is the type of remote type meter that will implement throughout the city? Or is it the system,
No,
the
yeah.
actual, like,
Just to work
the
out the kinks in the
software for,
system.
And it's not an evaluation period as much as it's a learning period.
yeah.
So we already own the software that we'll be using. Actually, it was software we previously used with our load management system. So that's what the pilot's about. It's just learning how a third-party data management arrangement works. Learning how to set up the meters so that we can, roll them out a lot faster when we're ready to go full. And then also, and maybe most importantly, constructing a new load management system where our controllers are also going to be running on this wireless mesh that the meters create. And yeah, so there will be controllability that way. For the customers that sign up for it, we'll have an ability to do that, where we'll also be able to show them, and we'll be able to see kind of on an ongoing basis how things are working. It also gives us information about voltage and loads on specific transformers. Just allows us access to a lot more data about how our system's actually functioning right now. That'll make it easier for us to design it to be more efficient, and eventually, be able to save a lot of money by tailoring our voltage and by right-sizing all of our equipment.
Cool.
Yeah.
So it probably won't be implemented until sometime later in the summer or later in the year.
Yeah, it'll be this
depending
summer
on-
that we'll be rolling it out, and then as it probably takes a few months to really get it going after we've started rolling it out, and with the goal being, within a year to 3 years of being done, we'll have the whole system rolled out, so.
How many meters do we have on the entire system? Like 1,300?
1,200 electric meters and 600 to 700 water meters.
How many water meters?
600 to 700.
Okay, I said 6,700.
Yeah.
That's what I thought too.
700.
10 million water meters.
One on every hose.
And we have
per
more electric
every
meters because our electric
1.25
service extends
people.
out beyond the city limits, where
City
sewer
is-
sewer
is
service does
three.
not.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So then the other item we talked about and acted on at the Public Utilities meeting was we authorized going out to, for bids on the solar project up at the Public Works Garage, which hopefully we can get that going and, see what kind of response we get on the
Yeah,
solar.
so I do have a little update on that schedule, that we'll expect to get the bids back in June, and so you'll be seeing, it'll be just like the previous McGough bid packages that you acted on for the Public Works facility, that they'll collate all the bids and give you a recommendation, review all of the contractors, and so we'll be looking in June to authorize that, and then we'll know more about the actual implementation schedule once we've got
How's
those
our
bids
gate
back.
coming along?
I was just going to ask that.
I think
Okay.
we're expecting it this week.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I still,
Very cool.
this week.
Yeah.
Thanks. This or next week, one of the two.
cool.
Cool.
That's all I have.
Y board, I missed last meeting, so the update, we met and did finance. I'm on the finance piece of it. Did that in April. Imagine that. And they are, the preliminary numbers, it was not final, but through March, they pretty much are right on budget and actually doing a little bit better. So that was really good news. They were very happy about that. This weekend is the dance recital, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. So that is a huge draw and part of fundraising. So they're expecting big numbers for that.
Cool. Okay.
You got 4 minutes.
I was gonna say.
Oh,
we're way-
I don't have that much actually. I sat on the
No pressure.
Bike Minnesota. The Bike Minnesota conference was down in Rochester on the 1st, and so I sat on a panel there to talk about what Grand Marais has been doing to promote bicycle and pedestrian safety. Talked about Highway 61. Talked about the bike route 41 coming up from the Twin Cities, and the Gitchigami projects that we've got going on up here, as well as the work that we're doing, preliminary work we're doing on the Sawtooth Bluffs project. So it was, I had maybe 5 minutes there, and I just like blasted it all out there, and then my connection died because I was Skyping in because I didn't drive down for that. And so I don't know if they had any questions or not, but I was just kind of like, there, mic drop, I'm out. So that was that, and I got a note back. What?
Said take that, Lonsdale.
Yeah, right. But I got a note back afterwards saying that people thought it was really great to see a small town doing so much stuff like that. So that was really encouraging. I went to the EMS conference, talked to a bunch of people there, went up and saw them burning down the inside of Tom Tabota. I talked to Benny at the end of that, and he said that it actually was a really, really good exercise. Because of the way that the rooms were shaped, they started the fires inside the bathtubs, and then the smoke would go up in the bathroom and then would sneak out into the rest of the room, and they actually could make kind of like a backdraft kind of situation in the bathroom, because when they closed the door, then it got oxygen deprived, and then when they opened the door, then it would go whoosh, and the smoke and fire would go out across the ceiling. And he said it was actually a really good exercise for teaching them how to suppress the smoke and the flames from that kind of fire. So that they're all done with that building now. We can demolish it anytime.
I was gonna say, do we know when that's going to happen?
We're actually going to be asking for bids to now just clean the rest of it up.
Yep.
So we're done with it.
Which is great. From what I understand, it was a very, very helpful exercise for the fire department folks. So that was really great. Creative Economy met again on Thursday the 3rd, and they're going to kind of follow up on the last thing I brought to you guys. They're going to put together like more formal information about what work they've done over the past couple of years to bring that and explain more of these are some models, these are some of the things that we actually want, because I realized when we started talking about it that I just didn't have the information all in one place to tell you all about what we had been talking about, because it was a lot of stuff. We've been covering a lot of stuff. So they're probably going to be coming back, not at the next meeting, but the meeting after that, so that then they have some time to put together a proposal kind of package of information talking about an arts council or commission or something like that.
First one in June.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. I also met with a resident of the area who has a piece of historic art, who was interested in potentially finding a home for that in the city. And they're not really ready to talk about it yet in public, but I proposed that maybe it would be a thing to talk about it for the Sawtooth Bluffs parking area, or have that incorporated into the Sawtooth Bluffs plan somehow. So I can talk to you about it afterwards and go from there. But it is pretty cool deal. And then I think that the only other thing that I had was this afternoon I jumped in the lake for the Unity Club for the high school. So they raised enough money to get me to jump with them.
Sheriff
So-
jump in too?
Sheriff jumped in too.
Oh, where did you jump in from?
Right in the harbor there, right in front of the trading post.
Okay, so you
Ran
didn't have
Ran-
to
we
jump
ran
off the
and-
dock at the Coast Guard or anything like that.
No, it's not quite time for that yet. Yeah, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was.
I'm cold sitting in this room, let alone jumping in the lake.
Yeah, when I hit the water though, man, it was one of those things where your body just automatically says, this does not feel
Shock.
the way that it should feel.
Now it doesn't feel at all.
Yeah, now it doesn't feel at all. Yeah, my ankles immediately hurt. Anyway, so that's all I have.
Hey, thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
Crazy frozen person.
Well, some people have to do that.
So, we need to schedule some more time to have lengthier conversations, work session style, with two topics. One of them that we need to deal with rather quickly. I'm hoping next week, Highway 61 and a follow-up to your previous features conversation. And then the other one is talking about, well, we're going to start with a revisit of just priorities in general, but I'm just going to go ahead and assume that one of them is going to be the liquor store in City Hall, because I've been getting that feedback, and we're going to then break into that and talk about that in a little more detail. So the first one, Highway 61, I think we should probably plan on a couple of hours, and the other one I think we need to plan on potentially a full day.
Oof.
But we can break it up if you want.
Oh my.
So, a couple of hours next week. So Friday's not on the table for that. Thursday from 10 to noon, the Highway 61 Steering Committee's already scheduled a time to talk about a communication strategy. So we could go before or after that, and that all of those folks would already be available. But it's really critical that as many of you are available as possible, and that we can hopefully get as many steering committee folks to come to a time that works for you as possible. So, what times work for you?
I would prefer not Thursday. I have meetings on Grand Portage that afternoon, so I would be at meetings from 10 o'clock until 4 o'clock on Thursday.
Sounds fun.
Tuesday late afternoon works for me, but I don't know, like 2, 3 o'clock. Jay's wrinkling his nose at me.
I'm teaching a class that day, so I can't do it on Tuesday. Class gets out at 5. Then it has to finish at
Thursday's
6:20.
hard for me because we have our therapist in, so I have people all day long.
Monday or Wednesday would work for me,
Next Monday, Wednesday, we're talking.
14th.
14th or 16th.
I have a meeting in the morning, from 9 to 10, but other than that, Wednesday
Yeah.
is fine.
Wednesday before 2 wouldn't work for me.
Monday?
Wednesday at 2?
That'd be fine.
Wednesday at 2.
Could work.
That would work for me.
Hey, everyone, Bueller?
So what I think I'd be able to do is by the end of this week, I'll have some more information from CJ that I can send to you that you'll have over the weekend. And then we'll also put together just a quick agenda for the Wednesday at 2 o'clock. And we will invite the steering committee to attend that session as well. All right, it's on. Now, City Hall, that's more of a heads up. We will communicate more about that via some sort of scheduling tool online.
Super.
But if there are weeks you're not around or days that never work, or if we have to do this on a Saturday, you know, something like that, well, I know. Just let me know. So.
If we have to do it on a Saturday.
And if we have to break it up and do it in 3 sessions or 4 sessions or something just to make it fit schedules, we can do that too. But we'll be getting in touch with you in a little more detail about that.
I was gonna say, or could we make a Wednesday like this a little longer, whether we start on the front end or move council to a little earlier to work at the back end to somehow finagle?
Maybe, if Wednesdays work for folks, I'm thinking that, you know, we're talking about maybe 6 hours of work here. And
Be pretty pooped by the time we get to the end of it.
Well,
if we had a really short agenda where you wanted to pay bills and we kind of hold other agenda items off unless they're absolutely necessary, we can certainly plan a regular council meeting like that. Start at 3 and do our work session, and then at 6:30 do a meeting and then go, and maybe do that twice. So 1 month and the next month, something like that might work.
So
See head shaking.
our next meeting here is the 30th.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we have a bit of a break.
I'm out until I'm gone from Memorial Day through most of June.
Through most of June. All right. Well,
Oh,
we'll
wow.
gather your input separately.
Remotely.
Yeah.
Skype.
Maybe even
If
that.
there's another quiz like that where we get to order things, just you let me have it, and I'll knock it out of the park.
Yeah, like what we do.
Oh, we're on the 30th, not
The
the
priorities.
23rd.
Yes.
Oh.
Second and last. Always second and last.
Oh,
Probably wins.
I was just thinking second and fourth. I don't know, because it's just fallen that way so
Gotcha.
far.
Well, we don't need to pick the day now.
Okay.
Next
Keep it
back
in
tomorrow.
mind.
Is
I
that
would probably,
for
you know, I could
just
probably
the
wait for that one.
kind of kickoff discussion of Liquor Store City Hall, or are we already designing?
No.
Prioritizing?
Certainly. So
Just that
when I
that-
say we're going to start with priorities, what I mean is we need to just revisit what is on your work plan, period.
Start the conversation.
And not just City Hall Liquor Store, but everything
City
that you
Hall.
think that we're going to accomplish, period. In the very high level, big picture, what is on your work plan in terms of priorities? I'm assuming that this project is. If it's not, well, then it's actually going to be a really short meeting, and then and we'll have to take a little more time to develop the next stage of it. If it is, and based on what I've been hearing feedback wise, I think it is, then we'll start talking about some of the bigger questions. We'll look at some site needs assessments. We will talk about some factors of location that we think are important. We'll talk about potential options. We'll kind of leave it at that level, and then we'll talk about next steps as well. So it's mostly a kickoff of like a real project rather than just, we want to do that, but we're actually going to kick it off.
So with regard to the council priorities list, have Kelly and Jonathan seen that list at all, or are you familiar with those priorities? that were-
We've talked about, and I don't even think that we've really done a good one
Well, we haven't
since
for,
in 3 years. So it's time to go back and revisit that again, and particularly now that we've got 2 new members, we just need to make sure that they are what I think they are, but that we get the input from our new folks too that
Yep.
get built into that.
Yeah, I agree.
And how, Anton, I know your term is up this year. Tim, what about, how long are you?
He gets 2
He's
more.
been
2 more after
years.
this?
He's
He's
grandfathered in.
grandfather. What about you, Jay?
He's up every 2
Every
years.
2
almost.
years.
So is it after this year? Do
Yeah.
you have to? Okay.
As long as he remembers the file.
I got it, man.
Just
I
write it
got
in.
it.
So there's 3 terms that would expire this year. You and I are
Mm-hmm.
but there's a special election too, so there
Well,
will be
that's right, four,
four
that's right. So-
seats open
Yeah.
in
So
November.
you're,
Some, I could be the only one
That's what I
standing,
mean.
standing
That's
again.
what I mean.
It's happened before.
Let's not talk about
No, and just as we think about stuff, it's like, okay, do we sit and do something and then all of a sudden we got 4 new people, you know?
that. Yeah,
Okay.
and it's when we set priorities, it's rarely just like the whims of the folks in the room.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really how you operate.
No.
And so there's a lot of carryover.
That's what we count on you guys for.
And it's not just that we're bringing it to you; it's that the community is bringing it to you.
Right.
Or that the issue is timely, and it's timely for the next group of people too. So, there's always going to be sometimes pretty significant course corrections, but there's these really givens that always kind of stay a part of it anyway. This building is not in good shape. It needs to be dealt with. Whoever ends up being here next year is still going to have to deal with it.
Great.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It sounds like Tim's gone on the 27th of June,
27th of June, I will not be here.
so I will try and make it back.
You best.
Well, I guess I don't need to be, but, depending as long
We
as
just like
you
having
three
you.
show up.
Provided, don't forget.
Well, we could come to you.
No,
Quite the road trip.
take away from the experience.
Do we have any other business?
8:10.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks,
Very
Chris.
good.
Bye,
Good night. Good night.